Yeah, we're going to parks.
Can I ask if we've got Chief Williver still hanging around on the phone, Mike? Do you mind if do you have anybody who's speaking on parks? Oh,
Bill Fulch.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And this could be brief. I mean, or not. It's up to you all. We could talk about this in as much detail as you want. What I will say, and I hope Bill Fulch is coming off of mute as I speak, what we don't really need to speak about on this page is the proposed capital projects list. And please be clear, those numbers there, this is a true wish list. These are not bonded, these are not cash, these don't exist in the world. Disc golf course, tot playground, etc. The Parks Committee prudently keeps a list of projects that they might aspire to pursue at a later date based on all sorts of things. So I just want you to understand what that list is. Those are not imminent, they are the furthest from it.
No.
The only reason to discuss them is if you specifically and explicitly do not want the Parks Committee even talking about them, which I don't think that's necessary, but that's my opinion.
I would like to add one.
Before we get there, can I just make a point that we're passing over page 4 of Derek's presentation? Are we all in agreement that those are canceled?
Yes, and that cancellation list was approved by Craig as well.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm just making sure we're all on the same page on that. Okay, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So again, this is a suggestion, but do whatever you want. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on the bottom half of this page. And to Derek's point, I'll just ask you this, Derek. Do you prefer we focused on the bond items over the cash for your purposes?
That would be my preference right now. But before we jump into that, the one item under the proposed capital projects was the well and irrigation athletic fields. Goes hand in hand with the existing project up top. Back when we first did the project, we estimated the cost at $70,000. Based upon the capital plan that was presented at budget time, we need $77,000. That part down below would be what we need to finally complete the project that's listed under the inactive, if we are still moving forward on it.
What's HRP, just to make sure I've got
Highlands Ridge Park. I ran out of room, so I was trying to abbreviate the park names where I could. HRP is Highlands Ridge Park.
We want to quickly look at the inactive. Do we all agree on the inactive?
Agree to what regard, Mark?
To cancel those.
Well, no, we had talked about the amphitheater before, that we wanted to keep the amphitheater alive, especially under the current circumstances and where it looks like we're heading in the future, that an amphitheater would be a good idea.
But with regards to those are all cash items. If we want to prioritize, we could come back and address that in a later date. It won't affect bond issuance.
Yeah, and I'm going to carry that message back to the Parks Committee. If I was the king, I'd eliminate the amphitheater, but I could be overruled on that. It's not important for tonight.
It's the Highlands Ridge well and irrigation, and that goes hand in hand with the 7,500 down below.
Right.
Because that would be rolled into the bond issuance.
Okay, well, it's been out there since 2016, though.
Which one, Joe?
The irrigation, the $70,000.
It's been there. Actually, Joe, this is Bill. There was a time I thought that that project was put on the back burner, but it is still a funded project, so at least in planning. One of the issues about any well drilling is, as you know, that it's all about how deeply you find water. So the estimate was originally put together with both the assistance of John Hansen as engineer and one of our local well drillers in terms of anticipated depth of well and size of casing in order to make that irrigation well work. We're looking at, I believe, in an 8-inch well drilled somewhere between 250 foot in depth with obviously some water pressure apparatus like we have at Chubb Park to be able to flow for irrigation for the 3 athletic fields up at Highlands Ridge Park, and also provide some water for the community garden, which is...
I get that, Bill. I guess the question is, it's been out there for let's call it 5 years now, 4 or 5 years. Like, is it getting done? Is it not getting done? Like,
Okay. Well, I mean, priorities wise, we started to focus on the Black River Park as the major focus of the park committee at that time. The project is able to be reactive, and I don't think the need has gone away. Of course, when you decide, if you decide to fund it, at what type, we can do that. It's one of those projects where it's a little hard to bid because we need an engineer to provide some specifications for it. It's going to be more than your current, I would anticipate be more than your current bid limit, so we're going to have some specifications on the ground.
before I'm willing to move forward with this, I'd like to see some indications of water usage and, well, that, you know, if there's any downside in terms of using that much water from a well in that area.
And how do we currently irrigate those fields?
They are not irrigated. They're irrigated by nature, Mother Nature.
And
You have a compaction issue on those fields. They've been that way since they were first constructed. Root depth is very, very slow, even with very, very short. Even with the aeration that we do on those fields, it's very difficult to grow healthy grass there and keep the impact attenuation where we consider it to be good. They starve for water there.
Is this going to require a DEP application, Bill?
It would require a DEP application, in my belief, yeah, to drill that well, yes.
So we don't have any engineering done, we don't have any DEP, and nothing's been done on this, basically.
Nothing has been. As I said, I thought the project had been deactivated for some time, and Derek corrected my knowledge about that about a year ago.
Then how do we put a number of 70,000 on that?
But again, it was original discussion with John Hansen and also with Brian Drilling, which has drilled most of the wells, also drilled the well we have at Black River Park.
Did that include soft costs for DEP application, attorneys, engineering?
It was a ballpark estimate on it, Mr. Curley, so I don't have a detailed cost estimate in terms of breakdown in each one, but usually these go by how many feet, what's your anticipated depth of well.
No, but I'm concerned. I understand drilling a well is fairly predictable cost, but the engineering costs, the DEP costs, we seem to spend a lot of money on those things around here, and I'm just concerned that 70,000 may not be an accurate estimate.
And actually, we know it's 77.5, as Derek's just said. And
well, I think we're looking at some increased costs for time because of the 2017-16 project moving forward. So when it became reactivated, we took a look at anticipated increase in costs over that time.
And how are you going to irrigate the fields once you get a well up?
Well, it has to be pumped. These would be, as we do at Chubb Park, we're not doing in-ground installation for the irrigation system. They would be done by our water cannons, essentially, with the same process we use at Chubb Park, where we have KIFCO water reels, they're called. And we plug them in, and they do a field every day.
We have all those already?
We have one KIFCO water reel right now.
Are we going to need
This
more?
would anticipate another one.
So this would anticipate another one?
Yes.
And a 10. Not sure.
So it's been a while.
Of course, and we'd have to pipe it from the well to the points of contact. At Chubb Park, the work was done by the Department of Public Works. We installed our own water lines from the well house. Put in the water taps into the ground, and they plug in and water those athletic fields at Chubb Park on an almost daily basis right now.
How much use do those fields really get? I mean, are we at the point where they're getting torn up, that the grass is a problem? Or I drive by there all the time. They don't seem to be in bad shape. Of course, they're not getting used a lot now, but...
Right. It's hard to tell right now, but typically they would be fully scheduled in this essentially the spring and the summer One of our proposals in the longer term is to perhaps change the field number 3, or make it a more multi-purpose field, and that's the larger 90-foot diamond baseball field, in order to make that more usable for multi-purpose sports.
When did that proposal come up?
That proposal has been, it's part of the 2021 capital proposed plan for the park committee. It came up this past year.
Convert baseball to multi-purpose.
Right now, with the number of Little League teams that are playing baseball teams dropping in our area, we already have one 90-foot field at Chubb Park. That's been the original field. At the time we decided to do the sports fields at Highlands Ridge Park, we had a higher demand for older baseball play. And that's why that field was developed per the master plan we had done for the park in 2006. That was then planned for a larger field. Times have changed, so we're looking at that available space to be able to deal with more of our expanded areas for soccer and lacrosse.
Well, no, wait, we're proposing to build 2 turf fields. We're proposing to redo the grass around those 2 turf fields in Black River. And now you want another multi-purpose field across the street as well? Is that the proposal?
That is the proposal. There's a number of organizations, Chester Men's Soccer League for one, which we're just shifting around at places. And let me be clear that the park committee, its proposal was for renovation of the practice fields at Black River to be able to increase the safety of those fields and reduce the problems with the undulation on those fields. This was an additional field proposal.
Which proposal was that, Bill? Because the one that's on the table now doesn't deal with it.
The one that's on the table now is a further discussion that's been done, but not by the park committee. The park committee has been solidly behind renovating the Black River grass fields to make them safer. That's been their primary focus.
Bill, come on, Bill. You've appeared before us numerous times in support of the turf. I don't know why we're talking about the grass.
Mr. Curley, I neither support nor oppose the turf plan. That has been brought forward by others.
Bill, I don't think we should go down that road because I think I would have a difference of opinion with you on that. So that's not productive for right now. If we don't have a need for additional baseball, then why do we need to irrigate those?
Well, you have an investment. You have an investment in those fields. There are users who would like to use those fields. We just don't have as many baseball activities going on at that level. That 90-foot, basically a senior Babe Ruth. It is a young adult level. We do have one team that is using that field now for essentially high school and college age play and young adult. But the Chester Mendham baseball softball program does not use that field during their spring season.
Well, are sports use dropping or is it increasing? I can't follow where we're at on this.
Okay.
He's saying it's shifting from baseball to things like soccer and lacrosse. But really the central question here, and it's good we're taking a critical eye here because it's been a while since the Parks Committee has even discussed irrigation at Highlands Ridge. This was a hot topic 2-3 years ago, and it's been quiet since. I don't know whether it is necessary at this point to irrigate those fields. And for what it's worth, I mean, I really don't have a community garden. I don't use it. I don't have that perspective. That, for what it's worth, was actually a big driver in this conversation. It might have originated there.
They have a well back there. It pumps. I don't know how much water it uses or if it's sufficient, but I know they have an artesian well back there.
There's a cistern down in the woods, and then via a pump, it's pumped to a plastic tank, which is then gravity fed into the garden. It's not a tested well. It's not potable drinking water. But that's how they irrigate, is via that cistern.
Yeah, isn't there a pump in the ground too, Tim? No.
I don't know, Brian. I believe the water level is fairly high, and it's just a sort of a shallower pump. I don't think it's like a full-blown well pump.
It's generated by the spring house, which is the old spring house on the original farm that sits alongside the Hunter's parking area in that vicinity of the park.
Well, I
So they
guess
draw water from there, pump it up to the cistern at the top to store it, to be able to provide pressure to the community garden.
yeah, Mike,
make it,
just in the interest of time, is this something you could take up at the next Parks meeting?
Well, darn it, everyone's stealing my lines tonight. What I was going to say is why we have a Parks Committee meeting on Monday. Why don't we adopt a similar approach that Tim and Joe are taking? Let's let the talk about this. We haven't talked about it in at least a year. It has not been on the agenda. Let's talk about it. Let's get some views. I'll report back at the next council meeting, which is enough time for that. I think Derek gave us an August 1 deadline or something like that. I think that's a reasonable course of action.
Correct. These are existing projects, so as long as I know whether they're rolling into the bond or not, August would be acceptable.
Okay,
So Bill,
then
could you please remember to put that on the agenda to have a
I will do
conversation
so.
about this?
I will.
And then we should talk about the other 3 bond projects under existing, correct, Mike?
Marcia, what did we decide on the Chubb walking path?
Well, it's cash, so that is, the recommendation was we don't necessarily have to decide on that right now. And
Right. Okay. Well, then just briefly, what's the holdup? I think in today's environment, a walking path back there and improving those walking paths is a good idea.
This is, go ahead, Bill Fulch, explain
Okay.
this.
So originally we had, for the improvement of the walking path, and that's actually a resurfacing from the original walking path. We had put it together a ordinance resolution of $70,000. There have been items that have been expended for that were quite a bit less. Part of it has been canceled, and a balance of $24,000 was left ultimately in the project to be able to restore the color code that was originally part of the construction. So the walking path was originally a red surface path around the pond, very attractive. But in the repaving, that color surface was not professionally done. We were able to save money with DPW doing some of that work. So that $24,000 is basically a leftover amount from that original project. There may be, and that color code doesn't last forever, so we may be coming up on another color code process. If you wanted to reserve some of that for that, you would probably be in the realm of somewhere around $8,000 to $10,000 for the paint. It is a specialized coating paint.
Correct. And my notes regarding that 24,000, we came upon that number because that was part of it. And the other part was Craig was trying to determine the costs or the possibility of expanding the path as well.
Right.
So since it was cash, we left it alone. But if that project were to be canceled, that money doesn't go back to the general improvement. That goes back to the open space for specifically parks projects.
And the expanding is not, is simply making it wider. It's not.
I believe that was the intent, yes.
And Marcia, if I could add to that, it was also, there was money left aside to further maintain that walking path because of the volume of use that it does get. Things like crack sealing, touch up on the rubberized surface that is needed to be installed at some point here, and then just your general pavement maintenance of it, because we all can agree that the use has more than tripled in the past 3 months, and it's a valuable asset to the township.
But there's no advantage to right now deciding cancel.
There's not.
Correct?
Correct. And this is just yet another item for the Parks Committee to take another look at. I mean,
Okay, so then let's focus on the bond items under existing capital projects active. Do you agree, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, they're all Black River, so by all means.
I'm sorry, I was going to say phase one I believe is completed, but I didn't want to cancel it until I had a chance to talk to everyone.
Okay, so if it's completed.
I thought it was. I just wanted to confirm with both with Parks and with the council on that one. That was the parking lot and I believe there's some preliminary work to start the grading. That was all that phase one was. Phase two, I know is active, which is why I did not put that down as a canceled piece.
Wait, what are we looking at?
Black River Fields practice field grading phase 2 and phase 1. So phase 1 was the parking lot expansion and
Well, how can we put a number in there? We don't even know what we're doing.
on phase 1 it's done, Brian. That was the parking lot expansion.
For
So that 18,
I'm talking about phase 2 for 2.15 million.
Right. So that's phase 2, which is, I believe that number reflects the estimate that our engineer gave us that would support the construction of the fields as we submitted to the DEP.
Well, our engineer hasn't given us a firm estimate. In fact, the last meeting that addressed this, he was supposed to go back and give us firm estimates that we were then going to take a look on and vote on the scope of this. We're again, the idea, I'm not done, Marcia. We're again back to the idea that because we approved a broad scope to toss against the wall at the DEP, that does not equate to what we've approved to do for Black River. They're two different things. The vote was entirely different, and we have not approved anything formally for Black River other than a submission to the DEP that said, here's the broad scope of what we might do. Do you guys have a problem with any of this so that we know what the outer parameters are? We haven't approved anything. So if we're now saying, no, we're backing into this, and I'm very uncomfortable.
No. That's all the more reason not to touch that number, because we don't know what it is. So let's not touch that number. Why would you take it down or bring it up at this point if we don't have the information?
Because it may be 2.5 million. We don't know what the number is. The engineer has not given us any firm costs.
Yeah, so we should not change that number tonight.
Well, what if the number is 1.8?
This number represents the amount that we appropriated in the ordinance. It doesn't mean
Right.
what the project's going to be. This is what we've authorized.
What the heck we do there is separate.
No, wait a second. When did we authorize this? We didn't authorize this for the proposal that's on the table now. We authorized that for grass fields.
Correct. That was the ordinance that we adopted back in 2019. It was a bond ordinance that was written. I'm not saying that the project is authorized to move forward. I'm saying we authorized the ability to be able to spend money on Black River practice field grading phase 2.
Right.
No, we didn't. We authorized 2.1 million for grass fields and for the renovation and excavation and everything that would go along with grass fields. That was the bond issue that we voted on. We did not approve 2.1 million for the 2 turf fields that are now on the table.
Yeah, didn't we authorize the expenditure of that amount of money for the improvements of the Black River practice field? And then I think the discussion has morphed from the amount of money that we would have been investing in grass fields only. Could we expand it and invest in artificial turf fields as well? And I think that is where we landed. So the amount
We haven't landed anywhere,
for
Mark.
the improvements to the practice fields to be finalized at some point. Is that correct, Mike?
No, it's not. I will,
Mike?
because
I would ask that question of Derek on how that was structured. I agree that we don't know the number tonight, so I would not recommend changing it at this point. I don't know what we would change it to. We don't yet know what is happening there.
Right, so Derek, was it ordinance for improvements to the practice fields? Derek?
The ordinance was written in such a way that we could address it as either grass fields or turf fields. We didn't specify in the ordinance. So the ordinance as written says that the money is only authorized to use as improvement to the Black practice fields.
Right. So, Brian, you are correct that we have not made a decision in one sense, but we have authorized that amount of money to be spent improving in what way we decide the practice fields of Black River Fields.
And
So
what
to my
costs
point,
more?
you don't touch that because whether it's grass or turf that is the amount that we have authorized.
What if it costs more?
We wouldn't be able to do the project without an additional supplemental ordinance.
To find ways of funding it at that point.
Right.
No, wait, you jumped ahead of me there. We authorized $2.1 million in a bond. If we're going to spend $3 million on this project, where do we get the other $8 or $9 million?
I think we have a conversation at that point. You need the numbers before you can have the conversation. I'm not going to say what we're going to do if we don't know what the heck the numbers are. Let's find out what they are. And if they're $5 million, I'm going to say, I'm out. Okay?
Well,
what the number is.
Not
you
only
need to
that,
know that first.
I think a serious discussion has to be had on, given the dramatic change in circumstances here, are we just going to sink $2 to $3 million into 2 turf fields and do nothing else practically for the rest of that park? Or do we make this a park for everyone and put other improvements in there so that other people, if this virus lasts for the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to need places where people can go outside. And a turf field for somebody 70 years old, or even my age, or 60 years old, is all but useless. We need to have offerings for everybody. So I'm just saying, as a preview, saying we're going to spend $2.1 million for turf fields, we're not anywhere near that yet.
Yeah, that'll be a great conversation, but it's not for tonight because this is about the bond ordinance. By all means, we're going to, at some magical point, have that conversation, but it's not in the context of this.
Right.
We don't know the numbers.
This is the amount that we would roll into the bond issuance if we were to move forward at this point in time. Again, if this is a project that we haven't finalized or come down hard on the numbers, it wouldn't make sense to bond it at this point, but if we don't bond it now, we wouldn't be able to lock in the lower interest rates. It's not an easy decision to make, and that's why I brought it before the council tonight.
Well, Derek, if we only spend $1.5 million, what happens to the other $650,000?
It is canceled and it goes into a reserve, which is called Reserve for Repayment of Debt Service, and then we can use that money to pay down the debt in future years, but the bonds wouldn't be callable immediately.
Yeah, we'd be having this conversation.
The money would still go.
Hold on, let me just, Derek, you said the bonds would be callable?
Would not.
Would not.
The money would not be able to be used somewhere else. If we authorize a bond issuance for $2.1 million and the project comes in at 1.5, the other money sits on our balance sheet until each year where we have to make a principal and interest payment, and then we take a portion of that fund and pay down the principal and interest on that project until the reserve is used up.
Okay, but it does not jeopardize the long-term basis of the financing, like having the bond subject to call.
Correct.
Right.
The bond would be, at this point, we're looking at the potential of anywhere between a 10 to 12-year bond, which means that it really wouldn't become callable. Usually the bonds become callable after 10 years, but if we're going to do a 10-year bond issuance, these bonds would not be callable. They would go right into
Just
maturity.
mature at that point. Yeah.
Okay, and then the soft costs are rolled into that same project. This is all about Black River and whatever we're doing there?
Correct. That soft cost represents, in the ordinance, we had to say that our soft cost would not exceed a certain dollar amount. That's what that represents. The two numbers together represent the overall project.
Wait, say that again, that our soft costs, where did we represent that?
When you write an ordinance, you have to specify a not to exceed amount for soft costs. So we wrote an amount not to exceed into the ordinance, but the overall ordinance was I believe it was 2.4 million.
Right, we've already got, I'm quite sure, either close to or over $100,000 in soft costs into Black River. Does that offset against that amount?
Some of that already came out of there. That original number, I believe, was 250,000, which is down to 208. The other portion of the soft cost was being charged against the line item up above, which was Black River Fields Improvement Phase 1. We've had soft costs for both parts of the project, and that's where we've been charging things as we go.
Okay, so for these 3 different proposals that we've had engineering and legal costs and so on and so forth since 2018, that's what you're talking about have been accounted for?
They've been, yes, the soft cost for Black River Fields has gone against both the line item that says improvements phase 1 and Black River Fields soft costs. In the beginning, when we first did the DEP approval the first time, that came against phase 1 because the ordinance we wrote was to cover the parking lot and then do the preliminary work for phase 2. Then we wrote a new ordinance specifically for phase 2, and that's when I started charging the soft costs against the phase 2 ordinance and left the phase 1 alone, which is why there's $18,000 left on there.
And if we exceed that soft cost number, what happens?
We cannot exceed that soft cost number. We would have to adopt a new ordinance at that point. That is the limit to which we can spend on soft costs. Now, if we decide not to use those soft costs at all, you can take the money that's soft costs and roll it into the hard costs, but you can't go the other way.
Right. So one of the easy questions, I'll put it that way, is can we cancel that $18,000?
That my intent was to cancel it, but I wanted to confirm with council tonight before I did that, and I wanted to check with Bill Folsch on the Parks.
I don't know the answer. Can we, based on the status of things?
My understanding is that phase 1 is completed at this point, and we have a funding source for phase 2. I see no reason to keep that portion open at this point.
Okay,
We're not charging against it anymore.
Let's agree to cancel it unless you get new information, different information in the next day from, I don't know, our engineer.
Mayor, this is Bill. I don't know if Craig's still on the line. Per the park committee, the only outstanding issue at the parking lot was the extension of the interior guardrail along the new parking lot. That would be the west side of the parking lot. And if Craig is still on, I think he may have materials
Yeah, I'm here, Bill.
And was planning to finish off that with Township installing that guardrail.
Okay.
Yes, so the guide rail that Bill is referring to was not on the approved print that we were following from John Hansen. That was pointed out, I think either Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you asked me to clarify it on the sealed print.
Yes.
Earlier this spring, and I did so. It did not call for an inner addition to the guide rail to mirror everything else that's in Black River Fields at this point. For some reason, it was not put into the scope of the project. So we can add that. We can add that in and use those funds to pay for that. And it would be a project for this coming fall for the DPW once we're done with all our road resurfacing work.
Okay. So the park committee does have an interest in finishing on that side, just so we don't have cars pushing up against the hillside there. That was one of the things they wanted to look at and recently discussed.
Which is an argument for maintaining the 18,000?
It would be, Mike.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Okay.
Just one more. What if the DEP shoots us down and we don't do anything?
Cancel the whole shebang.
Derek, where does the money go and where are we hung up then?
What ended up happening is if we roll this into the bond issuance, we would accrue interest on it. If the project is abandoned in its entirety, all that money would sit in the reserve to pay debt service, and it would go towards making payments to pay down the Black River Fields portion of the debt issued. But we would also still have to cover all the interest payments each year, because once you do a bond issuance, you can't call it, so that interest has to be made every year.
But just to be clear, the DEP has already given us an exemption to do the plan that we originally submitted to them. So that permission is still there.
Fields, Marcia.
It's not worth this rabbit hole. We're talking bonds here. I think we came to an agreement. I say we keep going.
Okay, so then are we done on parks?
Yes, the only project that was going to be canceled was the balance on the zero-turn mower, and I think everybody was okay with that.
Go right ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Then we move to police.